Hello everyone, Wriothesley will be one of the 7 older characters getting buffed with the release of Genshin Patch Luna 8, complementing the simultaneous release of snezhnaya and the new Stellar Conduct reaction in preparation for snezhnaya. Although the release of Lohen overshadowed Wriothesley in his Melt and Freeze teams, Wriothesley's new buffs differentiate himself from Lohen by giving him the ability to deal Stellar Conduct damage in Stellar Conduct teams, making him a strong Cryo Stellar Conduct main DPS that even rivals snezhnaya in some aspects, and will only just get better in the future with the release of new Stellar supports. So in this brief guide, I'll be covering everything you need to know about the newly buffed Wriothesley, including what changes he got in his kit, the best ways to build him, his potential best teams, and how strong he looks in the meta both currently and in the future with snezhnaya's release. The new Stellar Conduct reaction is a core part of the character buffs. I will show a quick summary of everything that is involved with the new reaction here, but the main thing I want to emphasize in relation to the character buffs is that for everyone other than Mizuki, the majority of the new character buffs are only enabled when they are in the Radiant Stellar Conduct state, which requires you to be in a Polestar field created by triggering Stellar Conduct. And on the patch the buffs are being introduced, the only character that can enable Stellar Conduct for the team is snezhnaya. Thus, in Patch Luna 8, you must have snezhnaya on the team in order to access the majority of the character buffs for the older units. But in the future, there will be new characters that you can use, potentially including Cryo Traveler, that can enable the use of Stellar Conduct. Now, let's go over what buffs Wriothesley got. His original kit revolved around him entering his enhanced state called Chilling Penalty with his skill, where he then performed normal attacks that deal more damage when he's above 50% HP, but which also drain his HP. But if he's under 60% HP, he can perform an empowered charge attack that also heals himself, and then his burst simply dealt damage. The new buffs allow Wriothesley to play the same gameplay style of enhanced normal and charge attacks with HP management in the new Stellar Conduct teams with some special additions. And the way they implemented this to his kit is unique because the new Stellar Conduct version of Wriothesley's abilities, passives, and constellations will mostly replace the original version when Radiant Stellar Conduct is active, clearly distinguishing between playing Wriothesley in his previous non-Stellar Conduct teams like Melt or Freeze and his new Stellar Conduct teams. For instance, Wriothesley's new Stellar Conduct passive, when active, will replace his current A1 passive. His original gameplay is kept, but in Stellar Conduct teams, Wriothesley's enhanced charge attack and his enhanced N3 and N5, which are the 3rd and 5th normal attacks in his normal attack chain, will deal direct Stellar Conduct damage, and Wriothesley gets an additional 30% damage buff to Stellar Conduct damage. Regarding Wriothesley's talent leveling priority, you still want to prioritize his normal attack talent, then his skill. But while his burst may have been useful in his Melt and Freeze teams, it doesn't look worth using for damage at all in his Stellar Conduct teams because the burst doesn't deal Stellar Conduct damage, so you can ignore leveling it for his Stellar Conduct teams. For Constellations, Wriothesley's new Stellar Conduct related C1 will replace his original C1 when in the Radiant Stellar Conduct state. When active, his enhanced Stellar Conduct charge attacks will buff the next instance of his enhanced Stellar Conduct N5. Vice versa also works, so his enhanced Stellar Conduct N5 will buff the next instance of his enhanced Stellar Conduct charge attack. And Wriothesley's enhanced state is extended by 4 seconds. With C2, when Wriothesley gets 5 Prosecution Edict stacks, which he gets from his A4 passive when his HP changes, C2 will additionally buff the damage of his enhanced N3, N5, and charge attacks that all deal Stellar Conduct damage in Stellar Conduct teams. But in non-Stellar Conduct teams, all of Wriothesley's normal and charge attacks will deal more damage with the newly buffed C2. So this is one constellation that is also a buff to his non-Stellar Conduct teams as well. Wriothesley's new Stellar Conduct related C4 will replace his original C4 when in the Radiant Stellar Conduct state. It gives the same attack speed buff as the original one, but without any overhealing requirement, and instead of buffing his enhanced charge attack healing, Wriothesley just takes 25% less damage. Lastly, Wriothesley's new Stellar Conduct related C6 will replace his original C6 when in the Radiant Stellar Conduct state. He gets the same amount of crit rate and crit damage, but the crit buffs all of his enhanced normal attacks and his enhanced charge attack. His Stellar enhanced N5 and charge attack will also generate an icicle to deal an additional instance of Stellar Conduct damage. Overall, Wriothesley's constellations for Stellar Conduct teams are pretty good in terms of damage increase. His early cons like C1 and C2 are strong, and of course C6 is a very large buff if you have it. And this is where Wriothesley actually has an edge over snezhnaya as the Cryo Stellar Conduct DPS. snezhnaya's constellations don't look that strong, but Wriothesley's does. So if you already have constellations on Wriothesley, it may just be more worth investing in him as a Stellar Conduct DPS with future Stellar supports. With his new Stellar Conduct teams, Wriothesley is looking to have new on-field combos. Wriothesley wants to finish his whole 5-hit enhanced normal attack string, and 5, since the 3rd and 5th hit N3, and N5 deal stellar conduct damage, and he wants to use his enhanced charge attack since it also does stellar conduct damage. But since his enhanced normal attacks need to be done at greater than 50% HP while also draining his HP, and his enhanced charge attack activates at less than 60% HP but also heal him, combos have to take HP into account. Here is an example combo for C0 Wriothesley. The first rotation is specifically different since the assumption is that you start at 100% HP. The N1E first rotation is also a little bit special because Wriothesley's attack string isn't interrupted with the skill. So the theory is that if you start with N1E, you will start draining HP at his N2, allowing his subsequent combos for future rotations to be completely HP neutral. Now, the HP balancing in these combos assume you don't get hit. If you do get hit by enemies and suddenly get below 50% HP, you can simply spam charge attacks until you get to above 60% HP. Every charge attack under 60% HP will be enhanced, and the healing on it has a 2-second cooldown. Now, if you have C1 plus Wriothesley, his enhanced state duration is extended. You can keep the first rotation starting at 100% HP the same, but for subsequent rotations, you can fit in more enhanced normal and charge attacks with the extra time. But of course, keep in mind that optimal combos will very likely change with post-release testing and the release of future new supports. For Wriothesley's new best builds in his stellar conduct teams, for weapons, he wants weapons that give crit and attack, with EM also being useful. However, weapons that give regular damage percent are worse off because it doesn't buff his new stellar conduct damage. His signature is his clear best in slot, and it was buffed to give stellar conduct damage percent as well to synergize with his new teams. Other 5-star statistics like Varesa's signature, Nefer's signature, Wanderer's signature, and Memory of Dust also work fine. And for 4-star weapons, Witsith is a good choice with his crit damage substat and damage buffing passive, though the elemental damage percent buff can be somewhat of a miss versus the attack and EM buffs. For artifacts, Wriothesley is a stellar conduct DPS in his new stellar conduct teams, so his new clear best set in this role is 4-piece disenchantment, giving stellar conduct damage percent and crit rate with his 4-piece. 4-piece Maruchusi Hunter is also fine, but eventually you want to switch over after farming some good pieces. For main stats, Wriothesley wants attack hourglass, attack goblet, and crit circlet. No cryo damage goblet because that doesn't increase stellar conduct damage. If you have a good elemental mastery hourglass or goblet, you can use one attack and 1 EM main stat. And if you have an attack buffer like Nicole on the team, going 1 EM and 1 attack main stat is slightly better. And for substats, Wriothesley wants crit, attack, and EM. Wriothesley doesn't use his burst in stellar conduct team, so you don't have to worry about building energy recharge. Lastly, for Wriothesley's best teams, he still has his melt and freeze related teams, but the only buff they got was really with just C2. Wriothesley's main buffs are for his new stellar conduct teams, which are limited in patch Luna 8 because you need to use snezhnaya in order to enable stellar conduct, but he does have some options. The buffed Yai is of course the best electro option by far in terms of damage compared to alternatives like C6 Beta or Fischl, so she's ideally on the team. And then the last support slot is where there's flexibility. For patch Luna 8, the best looking support is Nicole because of her team-wide attack buff and her strong shield, both of which are helpful for the team. Escoffier without using her burst for healing is good for damage, but will likely run into some practical issues, so supports like C6 Beidou, Lan Yan, and even Layla can be great for their useful shield. Because Wriothesley's stellar conduct attacks rely on HP control and management, he ideally doesn't want to use healers like Chi-Chi or Diona in his stellar conduct teams, which is why shielders are preferred for comfort. At C0, you will want to use one snezhnaya charge attack to fill rotation time, but if you have C1 plus Wriothesley, which extends his enhanced state duration, then you can just ignore using snezhnaya. So Wriothesley is kind of playing in a 3-character team, so when stellar conduct supports release in snezhnaya, Wriothesley is going to get a big buff, giving him a real 4th character in his stellar conduct teams for a damage increase and opening team availability for different support options. Overall, while Wriothesley's buffs may not have affected his existing melt and freeze teams very much, they are very impactful into making him a new strong cryo-stellar conduct DPS. Even in his patch Luna 8 teams, with snezhnaya not being the most relevant teammate, his teams look pretty good damage-wise. But of course, I don't recommend pulling snezhnaya just to play the buff Wriothesley because inevitably, new stellar supports will release soon. Whether they are stellar conduct specific or more generic stellar supports, Wriothesley's stellar conduct teams are going to get a lot better both in terms of damage and in terms of character ability for team building. Wriothesley does technically compete with snezhnaya as a cryo stellar conduct main DPS, and while a C0 snezhnaya is significantly ahead of a C0 Wriothesley in terms of damage, Wriothesley could gain more from new supports, since a new support over snezhnaya for him would effectively give him an actual 4-character team instead of a 3-character one. And on top of that, Wriothesley's Constellations are much better than snezhnaya's, so if you heavily invested in Wriothesley already, it may be worth your while to build around him as your main cryo stellar conduct DPS. That's everything I wanted to cover about the newly buffed Wriothesley. Thanks to theorycrafters Frost, Belph, Temeyaro, and MeowTews for all the reference calcs and their help with the creation of this guide. If you enjoyed this quick and concise guide, consider liking the video or sub to the channel so you don't miss out on similar guide videos in the future. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.